All right, folks, how you doing? Welcome to Syrian Antioch and Lincoln, Part 3. So, as always, we'll go through the disclaimer. Under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Once again, we're going into The Great Deception by Collins Beaumont. So, let's get started here. The top of a high or steep hill. Moreover, Syrian Antioch was erected on the top of a high hill. Antioch in Syria, I claim to have been the original and ancient city of Lincoln. There is a venerable saying to the effect that Lincoln was, London is, and York shall be the fairest city of the three. A saying hoary with age. At all events, there is no doubt respecting the fairness and importance of Lincoln in an early period. The first traceable city comprised an area of nearly 40 acres on the summit of its steep hill, and within its walls occupied an almost perfect square, 440 yards in length by 420 yards in breadth, protected on three sides by a broad, deep fosse, in places 80 feet wide, while the fourth side, a precipitous cliff, offered an impregnable defence. Its ramparts, faced with stone, were from 20 to 23 feet in height and from 10 to 12 feet in thickness. Vespasian, in the same way as Antioch, it was divided into four quarters, one being allotted to the Jews, also as at Antioch. Its castle and principal building stood on the summit of the steep hill, and originally the river Trent flowed at its feet, as in the case of the Orontes at Antioch. The surrounding region possessed many ornate Greek or Roman villas, as portions of tessellated pavements have revealed. Its main highway, Ermine Street, passed through its centre from London to York, and was said to continue to, quote, the very north of Britain at Caithness. A separate gateway gave entrance to its four quarters. How many Roman even legions may have been quartered there remains uncertain, except that the lower part of a large colonnade in the centre of Bailgate disclosed tessellated pavements, altars, monuments, and tombstones, the latter mostly related to soldiers of the Ninth Legion, which legion served with Vespasian in 69 AD on his proclamation as emperor after the death of Galba, when he sent to Britain for soldiers. The war against the Jews. So he was about to conduct the war against the Jews, but left Britain in consequence of the imperatorship. I think he's slightly off with that. Imperator means something else, but anyway, leaving his son to carry on the campaign. Vespasian had been active in Britain for some considerable time before he left to protect his interests after the death of Nero. Eutropius says vaguely that he encountered the Britons 30 times, and Suetonius states that he reduced two very strong tribes, 20 towns, and the Insula Vectis, and fought 30 battles against the enemy in the reign of Claudius. Nero, says Josephus, found no one but Vespasian equal to the task of conducting the war against the Jews. He continues, quote, he was also a man that had long ago pacified the West and made it subject to the Romans. He had also recovered to them Britain by his arms, which had been little known before. So I guess he's the right man for the job in the eyes of the emperor. I mean, before he became emperor. But anyway, so quote, Vespasian, however, did not conduct the siege of Jerusalem in AD 70, although Nero sent him at the end of 66. For nearly 3 years, he delayed taking active steps, hoping to subdue them without great bloodshed. This fact was referred to by Titus himself when he had overthrown the Jews and reprimanded them severely. In the course of his speech, he spoke as follows, quote, at this time my father came into this country, not with a design to punish you, but for what you had done under Crestius, but to admonish you. For had he come to overthrow your nation, he had run directly to Yeah, did I read that right? Yeah. He had run directly to your fountainhead and had immediately laid the city Jerusalem waste, whereas he went and burnt Galilee and the neighboring parts, and thereby gave you time for repentance. Not arrogant at all, like, but yeah, Vespasian. Well, he's following the motto of Augustus, isn't he? Festina lente, which means make haste slowly. In other words, take your time, don't rush in. Roman Lincoln. As I contend in the reconstruction of past history and geography, Lincoln was Antioch, was made a colonia by Vespasian, and was the headquarters or praetorium of the Romans until it was superseded by York. Professor Freeman stressed the importance of this honor by observing the high rank held by Lincoln among Roman cities, which it shared only with Cologne. Cologne and Lincoln are cities kindred in origin and name, added Freeman. However, Professor Freeman was in error, for York became the principal colonia, Colonia Prima Flavia, according to Pliny, who says that Vespasian settled a colonia in Caesarea under that title, whereas Lincoln was Colonia Flavia how do you say this? Caesariensis, I guess, quote, of Caesarea in that province, which Colonia Prima intimated that York was the first or principal colony instituted by Vespasian, for Flavia was his family gens. Oh, okay, that makes sense. I'll have a dry mouth. It's not an alcoholic beer, by the way. Don't worry, I'm not getting pissed. There we go. That's a wee bit better. York, originally Babylon, became Caesarea in Augustus' reign. Oh wait, I forgot the title. Bishop Remigius. Yeah, Bishop Remigius. I think that's how you say it. So anyway, if moreover the ancient Antioch in Syria were the earliest center of Christianity, the same can definitely be claimed of Lincoln. It possessed many churches and priories from an early time, including whence even bishops of the early church walked barefoot to Temple Brewer, a renowned circular edifice like the Church of the Holy Sepulchre built by Constantine in the present Jerusalem. The early Christian churches were circular. I've heard this before, by the way, I think from Michael Tazarian, saying that it was all based on worship of, you know, the stellar cult. Excuse me, before that, and it became kind of the focus on the solar cult, but there was still kind of a, how would you say, a holdover. Like originally, all the solar religions worshiped the sun and they worshiped the zodiac and venerated the zodiac and things like that. I've heard this before. Well, that's the point I'm getting at. Anyway, so Temple Brewer was strongly fortified, having embattled towers and was guarded by buildings. The Templars had many preceptories besides Temple Brewer. Bishop Remigius, the first Norman bishop, built the present cathedral, founded a leprosarium, and made Lincoln the centre of a vast see. So, obviously, a place of some importance. Paulinus, Bishop of York. Paulinus, who was Bishop of York for a short while in 625, baptized a large number of converts in the Trent at Segalocum, including the governor named Bressa and his family, according to the Venerable Bede. Segalocum, now Littlesborough, lies on the Trent near Lincoln. Was the Orontes of Antioch the same as the Trent? The two names are closely related, are they? How do you get from one to the other? They don't sound similar. One being the Greek, the other Saxon. It would seem that the river was considered most sacred. Oh, yeah, I mean, if it's where Christianity started, it would be, wouldn't it? There seems to be no doubt regarding the former importance and wealth of Lincoln as an inland port. William of Malmesbury, yep, described it as, quote, the mart of visitors by land and sea. Its canal system is said to have been of, quote, ancient origin and, quote, of great commercial value, whilst its sea facilities were such that it ranked as the fourth most important maritime city in the reign of King John. Ermine Street. Another light is thrown on ancient Lincoln by its highways, for such not only indicate its historic importance to transport with roads passing through from north to south and to the west, but also its ancient military movements when chariots were used in large numbers and a great deal of country was thick forest and in parts impassable. Most important was Ermine Street, the famous straight thoroughfare from Lincoln to the utmost north. As it enters Lincoln, it is still named the Strait, which recalls the events recorded in Acts when Aeneas, a disciple of Damascus, was told, quote, "Arise and go into the street which is called Straight, and inquire in the house of Judas for one called Saul of Tarsus." It is very applicable because in this reconstruction of the past Damascus, the great commercial mart and port stood on the site of the present London. Between Lincoln and Seaton, it was traditionally founded by Uz, the son of Aram, hence was Syria, and famed of ancient days for its quote, passage trade in wool, wine, corn, and manufactured goods. In the time of St. Paul, it had a large Jewish population. Evidence to show that London was originally Damascus is given in Appendix A. Another most important highway was between Lincoln and Seaton or Axmouth, a significant fact when the circumstances are realized. It passed through Cirencester and Bath to the once important southern port, the original Sidon. Transport from the south could join Ermine Street at Lincoln and proceed to the north. The Romans may have improved and repaired these long straight highways, of which no fewer than 15 proceed from London alone, but mostly they were constructed long before their day. So there you go. I mean, most historians typically they kiss Rome's ass. The Romans did this, the Romans did that, the Romans were fucking wonderful. When in reality, they were a bunch of, murderous. Well, don't say the word, but I'm not a big fan of the Romans. Let's just say that. The Cardike. So Geoffrey of Monmouth says that Belinus built straight roads of stone and mortar, and Thucydides says that the Macedonians did likewise. A matter of special interest when it is proved that their original home lay in northern Scotland from Inverness to Perthshire. The Atlanteans also built long roads, and that points to a period before the flood. As they used chariots, such highways were essential. These ancient thoroughfares certainly speak to the antiquity of British civilization. Stukely, the famous antiquary, also drew attention to the Cardike, a considerable ancient canal which extended from the Lincolnshire River Welland to the Witham and drained the water from the hills. One principal purpose of this and other canals, he says, quote, was to convey corn and boats from the southern parts of England to the northern how the fuck do you say this word? Northern Praetenturius. I have no idea. In Scotland for the maintenance of the forces kept there. Praetenturius? Oh, I'm not sure. Anyway, you can see the word on screen. Sorry, I don't know how you say it. The Ouse to York. Or Ouse? It is suggestive and explanatory of the wars with the Jews in the Edinburgh regions. The dike also passes through Lincoln, joining with the Trent and then the Humber, so a fleet of corn boats could continue by the tide up the Ouse to York. I'm not sure if you say Ouse or Ouse, but anyway. Long prior to the Roman occupation, some authority built a great bank along the seacoast, said to have been erected by foreigners. Archaeologists agree that Lincoln was an important city long before the Roman occupation. There is little doubt that Lincolnshire felt the full force of a tremendous earthquake at some distant time. In the area of Boston, great numbers of fir trees and oaks were found in a drain 40 feet deep, lying in all directions and appearing to have been torn up by the roots by a great natural force. Near Boston itself were found a smith's forge with horseshoes and other things made of iron 16 feet below the surface covered in silt. So I'm assuming this was a Boston that was in Britain, not the one in Massachusetts. Oh, we can see it there actually on the map. Just to the left, if you look a little bit down, you'll see it. The historian Dugdale. So in 1696, near the Welland at Spalding, at about 10 feet underground, were discovered jetties and the head of a tunnel which formerly emptied the land water into the old river. And near the river were unearthed several old boats from 20 to 30 yards distant, which showed that the river was wider formerly or had suddenly changed its course. In the same direction were dug up the remains of old tan vats or pits, and a great quantity of ox horn and shoe soles of a strange, unusual form with sharp pointed toes, quote, which things show that the surface of the country lay anciently much lower than it now does, and has been raised up by the sea. The historian Dugdale contended that the fenlands were firm, dry land, proved by the great amount of timber buried for trees, except willows will not thrive for the most part in standing water. Quote, the ocean, he claimed, broke into it with such violence that the woods were turned up by the roots, and silt covered the ground to an extraordinary depth to the verge of the highlands. Henry of Huntingdon. So Skegness, formerly a great haven, walled and with a castle, was swallowed up by the sea. And at Wisbech in 1635, workmen deepening the river found an earlier bottom 8 feet lower down. In 1796, Dr. de Seria, Syria, I'm not sure how you say it, and Sir Joseph Banks found a submarine forest stretching from Skegness to Grimsby. The foregoing accounts show us that a severe disaster must have caused great destruction and alteration in this part of the world. Henry of Huntingdon, describing it as it was formerly before the catastrophe, says, quote, this fenny country is rich and plenteous, yea, and beautiful to behold, watered with many rivers running down to it, garnished with a number of mares, both great and small, which abound in fish and fowl, and it is firmly adorned with woods and islands. Interesting. William of Malmesbury. Malmesbury? Yeah, I think that's how you say it. William of Malmesbury also paid tribute to the former beauty of these parts. Quote, the fens were a very paradise and seemed a heaven for the delights and beauty thereof, in the very marshes bearing goodly trees, which in tallness as also without knots strive to reach up to the stars. We may summarize the inquiry into Lincoln accordingly as a city of former great importance, preeminent before the time of the Romans, dominating a flat, fertile plain, and severed by, or and served even, and served by rivers, canals, and long distance roadways. Apart from becoming, in the time of Vespasian and Titus at least, the military center of the country, it was a city of great commercial importance, with ships carrying cargoes either for troops or for inland requirements. Pope Clement V. It was, in addition, sympathetic to the early Christian teachers and was renowned for its many churches, largely under the auspices of the Knights Templar, originally intended as a purely religious order until 1172. Yep, when they were first placed under the direct authority of the Pope. The order was formed primarily to guard Christian places, and its members were sworn to chastity, poverty, and obedience, but amassing wealth and power from the donations of their followers. They incurred the hostility of Philip IV of France, who persecuted and tortured them unmercifully. Finally, Clement V, who was placed on the papal throne by Philip, condemned the order in 1312 as a body protecting the holy places. Their activity in Lincoln can perhaps be explained. We'll get to all this in the future, by the way. Lincoln coat of arms. So, one further point about this interesting city, which has survived terrestrial upset and many great fires is its coat of arms, which consists of a shield divided into four parts by a cross, in the centre of which is a fleur de lis. The shield is surrounded by a wreath of bay or laurel. I wasn't able to find that when I googled it, but anyway, I'm assuming there's another version. Anyway, indicating fame with a bow and strings at the base. There was always significance in these ancient urban coats of arms. So much is probably the case here. The cross within the shield or wall may indicate the city of Seleucus Nicator, divided into four quarters. The garland or wreath of bay, which preceded the laurel as a symbol of homage, and the bow were both sacred to Apollo. The fleur de lis is more difficult to explain, and we can only speculate. Well, going to Mars, Atlantis, and Hollow Earth is explained there by David Icke. Anyway, counts, goblets. How do you say this? The alvela. I have no idea. The authority on ancient symbols relates it to the lotus flower and the trisula or the trident. Well, it probably goes back to Atlantis, I would suggest. Anywho, that concludes part 3. We'll wrap it up with part 4 quite soon. Thank you for watching.